The discipline of wealth. Overview. This audiobook is about a quiet idea that can change a financial life more than any clever tactic ever will. For most people, wealth is not built by intensity. It is built by discipline, the ability to act in alignment with what matters, even when the moment offers an easier distraction. The goal here is not to promise a dramatic transformation in 30 days. It is to offer a realistic path. We will talk about restraint, budgeting, debt, emergency savings, investing, lifestyle inflation, and the emotional habits that support long-term stability. If you understand what you should do with money but struggle to do it consistently, this book is for you. If you are tired of financial advice that sounds more like marketing than truth, it is for you as well. The chapters ahead are meant to sound like a steady voice beside you, not a lecture above you. If you want to apply these principles in your own life, there's a companion worksheet linked below with exercises and reflection prompts designed to help you take action. Chapter 1. Wealth begins with restraint. Most people imagine wealth beginning with income. Earn more, and everything else becomes easier. There is some truth in that. Income matters. Opportunities matter. Timing matters. But wealth does not begin at the moment money arrives. It begins at the moment a person decides that not every dollar must be turned into a visible reward. That is the first discipline of wealth, restraint. Restraint sounds unglamorous. It does not photograph well. It does not produce dramatic stories. Nobody gathers friends around to celebrate the exciting decision to keep driving a reliable car for 3 more years or to leave a raise quietly flowing into retirement contributions instead of letting it become a lifestyle upgrade. And yet, when you look closely at the people who gradually become secure, these kinds of decisions are everywhere. They appear small in the moment and enormous over time. Part of the reason restraint feels difficult is that modern life is designed to make immediate action feel natural. We are encouraged to express ourselves through consumption, to respond to stress with spending, to treat convenience as a basic right, and to interpret desire as instruction. When something catches our attention, the world says, "Why wait? Why think? Why not make today a little more enjoyable?" The answer is not that enjoyment is bad. The answer is that undisciplined enjoyment is expensive, and the bill rarely arrives all at once. It comes in the form of chronic pressure. It shows up as a credit card balance that never quite clears, as an emergency that becomes a crisis because cash reserves are thin, as a future that keeps being delayed by a present that always feels urgent. Restraint is not punishment. It is the skill of giving your future a vote. Think about what happens when someone lacks that skill. They may work hard, they may be intelligent, they may even know a fair amount about budgeting or investing. But if every increase in income is quickly absorbed by new obligations, then progress remains strangely out of reach. The problem is not ignorance, it is leakage. Money flows in, but it cannot stay still long enough to become useful. This is why wealthy behavior often looks boring from the outside. Repeating lunches instead of ordering out every day. Waiting before making non-essential purchases. Living in a home that fits the budget, not the ego. Ignoring trends that require new spending just to keep up socially. Building routines around what is sustainable rather than what is exciting. These habits do not feel cinematic. They feel plain, but they create margin. And margin is one of the most powerful forces in personal finance. Margin means you can breathe. It means an unexpected expense is inconvenient instead of devastating. It means a job loss, a medical bill, or a broken appliance does not immediately throw your life into chaos. It means you can make choices from a position of stability instead of panic. Wealth begins there long before it becomes visible in account balances. People sometimes resist this idea because they associate restraint with deprivation. They imagine a life stripped of pleasure, ruled by endless no. But healthy restraint is more selective than restrictive. It asks a simple question: what is worth paying for, and what is just a passing appetite wearing the costume of importance? That distinction matters. There are things worth spending on: time with family, tools that support your work, experiences that deepen your life, a home that feels safe and peaceful, good shoes if you stand all day, therapy if you need it. Help that prevents burnout. Restraint does not demand that every expense be minimized. It asks that every expense be recognized. When spending is conscious, money becomes a servant. When spending is impulsive, money becomes a source of background stress. One practical way to build restraint is to slow the gap between wanting and buying. In many households, the biggest problem is not that people want irrational things. It is that they make decisions too quickly. A short pause can change everything. Waiting 24 hours before small discretionary purchases and 30 days before large ones removes the emotional heat from the moment. What looked urgent on Tuesday often looks optional by Friday. Another way to build restraint is to define enough. That word matters more than people think. If enough remains undefined, lifestyle inflation will do the defining for you. Enough is not a number that ends ambition. It is a boundary that protects peace. It tells you when a purchase improves life and when it merely enlarges maintenance. It tells you when an upgrade is useful and when it is just another recurring bill dressed as progress. Restraint is the beginning because it creates the conditions for every other financial habit to succeed. You cannot save consistently without it. You cannot pay down debt efficiently without it. You cannot invest with patience if your lifestyle consumes every surplus dollar. You cannot become calm around money if every desire gets translated into action. And the encouraging truth is that restraint can be learned. It is not a personality trait reserved for the naturally frugal. It is a practice. Like any practice, it becomes easier when it becomes normal. That is where wealth begins. Not in appearances, not in theory. In the steady decision to stop obeying every impulse and start directing money toward a life that can hold up under pressure. Chapter 2. The Real Purpose of a Budget. Many people hear the word budget and immediately imagine restriction, guilt, or spreadsheets waiting to accuse them. A budget has somehow become associated with failure, as if it exists only for people who have already lost control. But a good budget is not a punishment system. It is a planning tool. Its real purpose is not to make you feel small. Its purpose is to make your money stop disappearing into decisions you did not intend to make. At its core, a budget is simply a plan for what your resources will do before the month begins to pressure you. That pressure matters. If you do not decide in advance where money should go, daily life will decide for you. Convenience, emotion, and habit are all eager decision makers. They are rarely thoughtful. A budget introduces thought before motion. This is why even people with high incomes need one. Money without a plan has a way of evaporating into upgraded tastes, recurring charges, easy conveniences, and small indulgences that feel harmless in isolation. The issue is not whether you can afford each item individually. The issue is whether the total pattern aligns with your deeper priorities. A budget is where priorities become visible. That sounds simple, but it is surprisingly confronting. People often say they value security, flexibility, generosity, and long-term progress. Then they examine their spending and discover that much of their money serves urgency, entertainment, avoidance, and friction reduction instead. That does not make them bad or foolish. It makes them human. But the gap between stated values and actual patterns is exactly where financial drift occurs. The budget closes that gap by asking concrete questions. How much is needed for housing? What amount is realistic for food? How much should go to transportation, insurance, debt payments, savings, and investing? What is available for enjoyment without destabilizing the rest? How much irregular spending should be expected rather than treated as a surprise every time? One reason budgets fail is that people build them around fantasy rather than observation. They create numbers that describe who they hope to be next month rather than who they have been for the last 6 months. They slash groceries to an unrealistic level, pretend miscellaneous spending will vanish, and assume discipline will suddenly appear in categories where no system supports it. When the budget breaks, they conclude that budgeting does not work. What really happened is that the plan had no relationship to reality. An effective budget begins with honest data. Look backward before you look forward. Review several months of spending. Count annual expenses that arrive unevenly. Notice the categories that consistently run high. Identify the subscriptions, fees, and automatic charges that have stopped feeling like choices. Build the plan from the life you are actually living. then begin adjusting deliberately. This matters because realism is more powerful than intensity. A moderate budget you can follow is better than an aggressive budget that survives 12 days. Another reason budgets fail is that they are too rigid. Life is dynamic. A plan that cannot absorb variation will always feel brittle. Some months include travel, school costs, birthdays, repairs, or medical needs. Some seasons naturally shift spending up or down. Budgeting does not mean pretending that every month should look identical. It means preparing for variation so variation does not keep becoming chaos. This is where sinking funds become especially useful. A sinking fund is simply money set aside gradually for an expense you know will eventually arrive. Car repairs, holiday spending, annual insurance premiums, clothing replacement, home maintenance, school activities. When these costs are ignored, they feel like emergencies. When they are planned for, they become part of ordinary life. The emotional effect of this is significant. Planned expenses do not carry the same sense of panic. They may still be inconvenient, but they are not destabilizing. That distinction preserves energy. There is also a common mistake in how people think about freedom. They assume a budget reduces freedom because it creates limits. In practice, thoughtful limits often create more freedom. When you know the essentials are covered, when savings are happening automatically, and when discretionary spending has a defined lane, you make choices with less tension. You are not constantly wondering whether a purchase is secretly irresponsible. You already decided what is available. The budget carries some of the mental load for you. A useful budget should also reflect the fact that people need some room to live. If every dollar is assigned to bare necessity or distant virtue, the plan becomes emotionally difficult to sustain. A modest amount for enjoyment, hobbies, social life, or personal discretion is not weakness. It is realism. The goal is not to remove all pleasure from the present. The goal is to prevent present pleasure from quietly consuming the future. Of course, no budget can solve an income problem on its own. If the numbers do not cover basic life, the solution cannot be found only in optimization. It may involve increasing earnings, reducing major fixed costs, seeking support, or restructuring obligations. A budget is not magic. It does not create resources that are not there. What it does create is clarity, and clarity is essential. It helps you see whether the issue is overspending, under-earning, poor timing, unmanaged debt, or some combination of all three. If you are someone who has resisted budgeting because it feels controlling, try a different frame. Think of it as stewardship. You are not being policed, you are being intentional. You are telling your money what job to do so it can support the life you are trying to build. And if you have tried budgeting before and failed, that does not mean you are not disciplined enough. It may mean the method was too complicated, too idealistic, or too disconnected from your real habits. A better approach is often simpler. Track the essentials. Name the categories that matter. Review the plan weekly. Adjust without drama. Continue. The real purpose of a budget is not to impress anyone with perfect categories or elaborate tracking. Its purpose is to reduce drift. It helps transform money from something reactive into something directed. It tells your future self that the present will no longer spend recklessly on their behalf. That is not small work. It is one of the clearest expressions of discipline there is. Our companion worksheet includes a full personal discipline audit and guided reflection exercises if you want to go deeper. Chapter 3. Debt, Pressure, and the Cost of Borrowed Time. Debt is not only a financial issue, it is often a pressure issue. It alters the way people experience time. It can make the future feel pre-spent and the present feel crowded. Even manageable debt has a way of narrowing emotional space because part of tomorrow's effort has already been promised away. Not all debt is identical. That matters. Some debt is high interest and openly destructive. Some is tied to education, transportation, or housing and may have been taken on in good faith under difficult constraints. Some debt reflects carelessness. Some reflects survival. Some reflects a culture that normalizes borrowing before it teaches restraint. So the goal here is not moral judgment. The goal is clarity. Debt becomes dangerous when it quietly reorders your life. When minimum payments consume income, options shrink. When interest accumulates faster than principal falls, effort stops feeling productive. When credit becomes the default way to handle ordinary life, emergencies multiply because there is no clear boundary between true need and habitual borrowing. Over time, a person can start working mainly to service decisions already made. That is an exhausting way to live. One reason debt persists is that it often softens immediate consequences. Borrowing allows a present desire or present need to bypass present capacity. That can be helpful in real emergencies, but it can also train people to solve discomfort with delay. The purchase happens now, the reckoning happens later. By the time later arrives, the emotional intensity of the original decision is gone, but the payment remains. This is why credit card debt in particular can be so corrosive. It combines convenience with disconnection. Swiping a card feels less final than handing over cash or watching a debit balance drop in real time. The psychological distance makes it easier to underestimate the cost. And when interest rates are high, that distance becomes expensive very quickly. Still, people do not overcome debt through shame. Shame drains energy. It encourages hiding, avoidance, and all-or-nothing thinking. Discipline asks for a different posture. Face the numbers, name the balances, list the rates, understand the minimums, see the total without dramatizing it and without minimizing it. Debt loses some of its power the moment it becomes specific. From there, progress usually comes through a combination of stabilization and repayment. Stabilization means stopping the pattern that keeps creating new debt. That may involve pausing discretionary spending, building a small emergency buffer, removing easy access to credit, or restructuring a budget that has been too loose. Without stabilization, repayment becomes a treadmill. Balances may go down briefly, but the underlying behavior keeps rebuilding the problem. Repayment is the second part. There are different methods, and people often debate them. Some prefer paying off the highest interest balance first because it is mathematically efficient. Others prefer paying off the smallest balance first because an early win improves momentum. Both approaches can work. The deeper question is which method helps you stay consistent. Personal finance is not solved only by math. It is solved by math plus behavior. Consistency matters more than cleverness. If you are carrying debt, one of the most important emotional shifts is learning to value reduced pressure as a real return. People sometimes compare debt repayment to investing and think, I could potentially earn more by putting money elsewhere. But that calculation is incomplete if it ignores peace. Lower required payments, fewer obligations, greater resilience in a job change or family emergency, more flexibility in a hard month. These are not abstract benefits, they materially improve life. Debt also has an opportunity cost beyond interest. It competes with saving. It competes with investing. It competes with career flexibility. It competes with rest. A household carrying heavy debt often has less room to make long-term decisions because so much monthly cash flow is already committed. This is one reason debt reduction can feel slow but still be transformative. Every balance that disappears returns a little more breathing room to the future. If your debt originated in a difficult period, it is worth saying something important. Needing help or making imperfect decisions under pressure does not make you irresponsible forever. Many people took on debt while supporting family, covering healthcare, surviving layoffs, or trying to create stability with limited options. The task now is not to relive every mistake. It is to build a structure that prevents temporary strain from becoming a permanent financial identity. One practical mindset that helps is to stop treating debt payoff as a side project. If debt is serious, it is not a hobby. It is a central financial objective for a season. That does not mean your entire personality must become austere. It means your choices become coordinated. Income increases are directed thoughtfully. Refunds and bonuses are assigned intentionally. Spending is evaluated through the lens of whether it delays freedom. Debt teaches a difficult lesson about time. The future can be used before it arrives, but it also teaches a hopeful lesson. Time can repair what time and interest once damaged, provided discipline becomes the pattern. Small surpluses applied steadily can reverse a situation that once felt immovable. This is why patience matters. A person deep in debt may feel tempted by extreme plans, desperate investments, or promises of fast recovery. That is understandable. Pressure makes urgency seductive, but most lasting recovery is built the slower way, Clear accounting, realistic budgeting, lower spending, more consistent payments, controlled expectations, better habits. Repeat. Borrowed time is stressful because it narrows choice. Paid-off obligations widen it again. That widening is one of the quiet pleasures of financial maturity. You feel it when your paycheck belongs more fully to the present. You feel it when an emergency no longer has to go on a card. You feel it when a large expense becomes an inconvenience instead of a spiral. Reducing debt is not only about cleaning up the past, it is about restoring ownership of the future. Chapter 4: Emergency Funds and the Architecture of Calm. People often think of financial progress in terms of growth, higher income, bigger investments, larger net worth. Those things matter, but one of the most meaningful shifts in a financial life is not about growth at all. It is about stabilization. An emergency fund is part of the architecture of calm. That phrase matters because money is not only arithmetic, it shapes the emotional climate of daily life. When there is no buffer between you and the unexpected, ordinary living can feel fragile. A car problem is no longer just a repair. It becomes a budget crisis. A medical bill is not just frustrating, it threatens rent. A few reduced work hours create immediate fear. In that environment, even responsible people can make poor decisions because urgency crowds out perspective. An emergency fund changes the texture of those moments. It does not remove difficulty. The flat tire still happens. The deductible still stings. The pet still needs care. But cash reserves create a pause between the problem and the panic. That pause is invaluable. It allows you to respond instead of react. This is why emergency savings deserve so much respect. They are not idle money. They are working in a different way. They purchase flexibility. They protect against expensive borrowing. They reduce the chance that one setback triggers several more. They allow a person to absorb shocks with dignity. The size of an emergency fund will vary by situation. A household with a stable dual income and low fixed costs may need something different from a single earner with dependents or a freelancer with irregular income. The common principle is simple. The more exposed your life is to disruption, the more valuable liquidity becomes. For many people, the first milestone is modest. Even a small buffer can interrupt the cycle of repeatedly using debt for manageable surprises. That early stage matters because it builds proof. When you pay for an unexpected prescription or repair from savings instead of a credit card, you experience emergency savings not as theory, but as relief. Relief is motivating. After that, the goal often expands into a more substantial reserve, usually measured in months of essential expenses rather than in a round number chosen for its appearance. Essential expenses means the baseline cost of keeping life functioning. Housing, utilities, food, insurance, transportation, debt minimums, and necessary care. It does not necessarily include every nice-to-have expense. The purpose of this money is stability, not ideal comfort. Where should this money live? Usually somewhere safe, liquid, and separate enough that it is not constantly blurred with spending cash. An emergency fund is not long-term investment money. It is not there to chase returns. Its job is availability. Trying to maximize growth with money meant for near-term protection can create exactly the vulnerability the fund was built to solve. One of the best features of an emergency fund is that it changes what counts as an emergency. Without savings, many predictable costs feel catastrophic. With savings, true emergencies become easier to distinguish from routine maintenance. That distinction supports better decisions. Not every inconvenience deserves the emotional intensity of a crisis. The challenge, of course, is that building cash reserves can feel frustrating, especially when other goals compete for attention. Saving into an account that you hope not to use lacks the excitement of investing and the visible satisfaction of buying something tangible. It may even feel inefficient, but mature financial life is full of actions whose value is mostly revealed when conditions go wrong. Insurance works that way, maintenance works that way, sleep works that way, emergency savings work that way too. If saving feels hard, the best response is usually not self-criticism, but simplification. Automate transfers. Reduce the target into stages. Use windfalls strategically. Redirect recurring money when debts disappear or bills drop. Lower friction. A reserve is built more by consistency than by dramatic acts of sacrifice. Another helpful insight is that emergency funds and budgeting are partners. A budget tells current income where to go. An emergency fund protects the budget from being broken by real life. Without that protection, every surprise competes with the same monthly resources, and the plan becomes fragile. Together, they create a more durable financial system. For listeners who feel far from this goal, start smaller than pride would prefer. Start with a first threshold that makes your next inconvenience easier to handle. Build the identity before the total. Someone who consistently protects a little is becoming the kind of person who can eventually protect a lot. The architecture of calm is not created through one giant deposit. It is assembled piece by piece. A month of expenses, then two, then perhaps more, depending on your life. Over time, you notice that money conversations feel less sharp. The checking account is no longer carrying the entire emotional burden of the household. One bad week does not get to define the entire month. And this is what disciplined wealth feels like before it looks impressive. It feels less brittle, less reactive, more prepared. It feels like knowing that life can still surprise you without immediately knocking everything over. That kind of calm is worth building on purpose. Chapter 5: The Slow Power of Investing. Investing is often presented in one of two unhelpful ways. It is either made to sound intimidating and opaque, as if only experts with advanced terminology can participate wisely, or it is made to sound thrilling, fast, and full of hidden opportunities waiting for the bold. Both stories distort the experience most people actually need. For ordinary wealth building, investing is usually an exercise in patience. That may be disappointing to hear if you were hoping for excitement, but it is deeply good news if what you want is a reliable path. The slow power of investing does not come from brilliant prediction. It comes from time, consistency, diversification, and the decision not to interrupt a sensible plan every time emotion changes. The basic idea is simple. Some portion of today's earnings is set aside and placed into productive assets that over long periods have historically grown more than cash sitting idle. Not every year is positive. Not every market period is smooth. But across decades, disciplined investing has helped many people participate in economic growth they could not create through labor income alone. The word decades matters. Much confusion comes from asking long-term tools to deliver short-term reassurance. People begin investing and then immediately judge the experience by what happens over a few months. If markets fall, they feel betrayed. If markets rise, they may feel invincible. Neither reaction is especially useful. Markets move. That is part of the deal. The real power of investing is not in avoiding movement. It is in staying committed to a sound approach through movement. This is why speculation and investing are not the same thing. Speculation is often driven by concentrated bets, short time horizons, story-driven enthusiasm, or the belief that superior returns are readily available to anyone who moves fast enough. Investing, in the steadier sense, is less dramatic. It is the repeated purchase of broadly diversified assets, usually through tax-advantaged accounts when available, with an understanding that the process is ordinary and the results are cumulative. Ordinary is underrated. A person who contributes regularly to retirement accounts, keeps costs low, avoids panic selling, and continues through multiple market cycles may not seem impressive in conversation. But these behaviors are powerful precisely because they are repeatable. Financial success is often built on repeatable actions rather than dazzling decisions. There is also a practical order to consider. Before investing heavily, many people need a foundation, a workable budget, an emergency reserve, and a plan for high-interest debt. Without that base, investing can become emotionally unstable. The first market downturn then collides with a cash shortage or debt pressure, and money that was meant to remain invested gets pulled out at the worst time. Stability makes patience possible. Once that foundation exists, automation becomes an ally again. Regular contributions remove the need to guess perfect timing. They make investment behavior less dependent on mood and news cycles. This matters because headlines are designed to command attention, not to build your retirement plan. If your financial strategy changes every time the public mood swings, the strategy never gets long enough to work. Compounding itself is one of the most misunderstood forces in money. People like the concept, but they often underestimate the emotional discipline it requires. In the early years, progress can feel modest. Contributions may matter more than growth. The balances may not yet look life-changing. This is where many people lose interest or begin searching for shortcuts. But compounding is powerful partly because it is unimpressive at the beginning. It rewards those who continue before the payoff is obvious. Investing also benefits from humility. None of us knows the future with precision. We do not know which sector will dominate next decade, which headlines will rattle markets next year, or when fear will replace optimism again. A disciplined investor builds around that uncertainty rather than pretending to escape it. Diversification is an expression of humility. So is keeping expectations grounded. So is recognizing that the market does not owe us smooth progress. The antidote is a written philosophy, even if it is brief. Something as simple as this: I invest regularly. I keep costs reasonable. I diversify. I do not make major changes because of short-term noise. I review my plan periodically, not emotionally. A philosophy does not eliminate stress, but it gives stress fewer places to drive the car. It is also important to say what investing cannot do. It cannot instantly repair years of low saving. It cannot guarantee a specific outcome. It cannot turn a deeply unstable financial life into a stable one by itself. And it cannot replace the need for income, budgeting, and risk management. Investing is powerful, but it works best as part of a larger system of discipline. For some listeners, investing has felt inaccessible because they assume meaningful participation requires large sums. It is true that more money invested over time usually leads to more growth. But beginning matters. Starting small is not pointless. It is often the moment a person stops being a spectator in their own future. The calmest investors are usually not the ones who never feel concern. They are the ones who have already decided what concern will not make them do. They know volatility will come. They know headlines will tempt them. They know other people will tell better stories about faster gains. But they also know that wealth is often built by refusing to exchange a sound long-term plan for a short-term emotional response. The slow power of investing is easy to underestimate because it does not flatter the ego. It asks for regular contributions, restrained expectations, and long attention. It offers no drama and very little applause. What it offers instead is a chance for your money to keep working while you keep living. That is not flashy, it is better. Chapter 6: Lifestyle Inflation and the Disappearing Rays. One of the quieter threats to wealth is not overspending during hard times. It is overspending during better times. When income rises, life often expands to meet it. The apartment becomes a larger apartment. The car payment becomes more ambitious. Dining out becomes ordinary. Convenience becomes frequent. Subscriptions multiply. Travel upgrades become expected. Little by little, what once felt like improvement becomes baseline. Then, strangely, the person earning more may still feel no safer than before. This is lifestyle inflation, and it is one of the main reasons increased income does not automatically create increased wealth. The issue is not that better earnings should produce no visible benefits. It is reasonable for a higher income to improve life. The question is whether every gain gets fully absorbed by higher ongoing costs. If it does, then the raise disappears into maintenance. More effort produces more obligations, but not necessarily more freedom. This is one of the hardest ideas for people to embrace because income growth is often emotionally linked to relief, reward, and identity. After years of working, learning, or struggling, a better paycheck can feel like proof that you are finally allowed to stop being careful. In some cases, there is also pressure from peers or family. A person whose earnings rise may feel expected to look different, live differently, and spend differently. But the discipline of wealth asks a countercultural question. What if part of the raise never becomes lifestyle at all? That single practice can change a financial trajectory. When income increases, automatically directing a portion towards savings, debt reduction, or investing allows progress to happen before expanded spending claims the entire difference. If the adjustment happens quickly, you may barely feel the sacrifice because the higher baseline was never fully experienced as spendable cash. This is one reason automation at moments of positive change is so powerful. A new salary, a paid-off loan, a bonus, a reduced insurance bill, a refinanced savings, a grown child leaving a recurring household expense behind. These are opportunities to redirect money before it becomes invisible. Lifestyle inflation is especially dangerous with fixed costs. A slightly nicer restaurant habit can usually be corrected. A bigger mortgage, more expensive vehicle, or ongoing private school commitment is harder to reverse. The wealth-building question is not only, can I afford this now? It is also, how much future flexibility does this remove? Flexibility is often more valuable than status. Consider the difference between two households with equal income. One lives near the edge of its means in order to maximize visible quality. The other keeps major costs lower and preserves margin. During stable times, the first may appear more successful. But when a layoff, illness, or economic shift arrives, the second household often proves stronger. It has choices. Choices are a form of wealth. Another subtle problem with lifestyle inflation is that it keeps resetting the meaning of enough. The things that once felt luxurious become ordinary. Gratitude fades faster than obligations do. This can produce a strange emotional treadmill where people work harder for upgrades they stop noticing. Financial discipline is not only about controlling expenses, it is also about protecting your ability to remain satisfied without endless escalation. Contentment is underrated as a financial skill. That does not mean forcing yourself to want nothing. It means recognizing that desire naturally expands if left completely unexamined. Many wants are socially contagious. You do not discover them alone in a quiet room. You absorb them through comparison, exposure, and repetition. The more often you see a certain standard, the more it can begin to feel normal than necessary. One response is to build deliberate gratitude practices around money. Not performative gratitude, concrete gratitude. Notice what is already stable. Notice what still works. Notice the bills you can pay, the options you do have, the conveniences that have become invisible through familiarity. Gratitude does not replace planning, but it weakens the hunger for endless upgrading. It is also useful to distinguish between one-time improvement and recurring escalation. Paying for a course that genuinely increases skill may be very different from locking in a permanent monthly cost that adds little durable value. Buying quality once may be wiser than repeatedly buying cheap replacements. Spending more is not inherently foolish. The question is whether the spending strengthens life or simply raises the cost of maintaining the same emotional state. Families benefit from discussing this openly. What should improve if income grows? What should remain modest on purpose? Which goals deserve the new margin? Without these conversations, default expansion takes over. Each person assumes a little more is reasonable, and soon the new normal is expensive. One practical rule is to divide raises on purpose. Some percentage can improve present life. Some can protect the future. The exact split will vary, but the principle is strong. Growth in income should not merely create growth in expenses. It should create growth in resilience, investment, and choice. There is freedom in refusing to spend at the speed of your earnings. It gives you the ability to leave room around your life. It lets income create assets instead of only appearances. It means that when your circumstances improve, your future improves too, not just your consumption. The disappearing raise is a warning that better income can still produce the same pressure if discipline does not intervene. But that warning is also an opportunity. Every increase in earnings asks a question. Will this become more life to maintain or more strength to build with? People who become financially steady do not always answer that question perfectly, but they answer it consciously. They enjoy some of the progress and save some of the progress. They let their lives improve, but they do not let every improvement become permanent financial gravity. That balance is wiser than it first appears. It allows success to be felt now without being consumed now. Chapter 7: Identity, Comparison, and Quiet Confidence. Money is never only money. It carries meaning. It signals things to us and to other people. It can represent safety, competence, freedom, adulthood, generosity, status, or belonging. That is why financial discipline is not just a mechanical skill. It is also an identity practice. Many unwise money decisions are really attempts to manage emotion in public. Comparison is one of the strongest forces here. It is difficult to remain calm about your own pace when other people's outcomes are constantly visible. You see homes, trips, renovations, cars, wardrobes, business wins, and moments of apparent ease. What you do not see are the trade-offs, the debt, the inheritances, the stress, the background support, the risk tolerance, or the private costs attached to those visible markers. Comparison edits reality. It presents other lives as finished products while you experience your own life from the inside, with all its ambiguities and delays. No wonder discipline becomes harder when social exposure is high. Spending can begin to feel like a way to stay emotionally current, to avoid the discomfort of appearing left behind. Quiet confidence is the antidote. Quiet confidence says, I know what I am building, and I do not need every decision to be legible to outsiders. It is the willingness to rent longer than your peers if buying would strain you. It is the willingness to drive the paid-off car, skip the flashy vacation, decline the luxury upgrade, and save privately while others display publicly. Quiet confidence is not anti-pleasure, it is anti-performance. This kind of confidence often grows when identity becomes less entangled with visible consumption. If your self-respect depends heavily on external signs of success, disciplined money choices will feel emotionally expensive. Every modest decision will seem like an injury to status. But if your identity is built more on character, competence, relationships, and stability, then modesty in spending becomes easier to tolerate and even easier to prefer. The goal is not indifference to appearance in every area of life. Presentation matters in some settings, comfort and beauty matter too. The problem is when outward signals become the main measurement of inward progress. That is how people end up rich in symbols and poor in margin. There is a phrase worth remembering. Do not spend money you have not kept to display a life you do not fully own. That sentence may sound severe, but it points toward liberation. Financial self-respect is different from financial display. Self-respect is calm. Display is hungry. Financial identity also includes the stories you tell about yourself. Some people carry an old script, I am just bad with money. Others carry a defensive one, I deserve this because I have worked hard. Others carry a fearful one, if I do not take this opportunity now, I will miss my chance forever. These stories influence behavior because they simplify choices before choices arrive. Part of discipline is rewriting those scripts in a more truthful way. Maybe the new script is, I am learning to make slower decisions. Or, I do not need to look prosperous to become stable. Or, I can enjoy progress without turning every increase into obligation. Or simply, I am becoming someone who keeps more than I earn. That last sentence can be surprisingly powerful. It turns wealth building into an identity anchored in behavior, not luck. There is also a dignity in private progress. Not every good financial decision needs to be visible. No one may applaud the emergency fund, the debt payoff spreadsheet, the increased retirement contribution, or the months spent declining tempting purchases. But hidden progress is still progress. In fact, some of the most meaningful financial achievements happen quietly because they are about strength, not spectacle. Quiet confidence is especially useful during periods when your pace is slower than you hoped. Maybe income has stalled. Maybe family responsibilities are heavy. Maybe you are rebuilding after mistakes. Maybe the market is down. Maybe your chapter is not externally impressive. Discipline during those periods can feel lonely if your only reward is public recognition. But if your reward is internal steadiness, the work remains worthwhile. Money becomes less emotionally chaotic when it is no longer asked to carry the entire burden of self-worth. Then it can return to its proper role, a tool, a resource, a means of supporting values. It matters greatly, but it does not need to narrate your value as a person. As that shift happens, discipline becomes less brittle. You no longer need every choice to prove something. You can choose what is wise even when it looks plain. You can delay without feeling diminished. You can save without feeling invisible. You can build slowly without assuming you are failing. Quiet confidence does not remove ambition. It purifies ambition. It frees you from chasing outcomes mainly for their social effect and allows you to pursue stability, generosity, and real freedom instead. That kind of confidence is deeply compatible with wealth because it helps you stop leaking money into performances you no longer need to give. Closing. Quiet strength over time. If there is one message running through this audiobook, it is that wealth is less mysterious than it often appears. For most people, it is not the result of one brilliant move. It is the result of repeated alignment: earning, planning, restraining, saving, investing, and adjusting again. The encouraging part is that progress does not require perfection. It requires direction. Start where the pressure is highest. If spending is chaotic, create visibility. If debt is heavy, stabilize and begin reducing it. If every surprise becomes a crisis, build a reserve. If income has grown without improving security, redirect the difference. Discipline is not coldness. It is care expressed consistently. It is how you protect your future from your most impulsive moments and gradually build a life that can stand up under pressure without looking dramatic from the outside. Wealth built this way may not always be loud, but it is sturdy. It is useful. It widens choices and lets you live with more steadiness than strain. Build quietly, build clearly, and build in a way your future self will recognize as an act of respect. If this audiobook helped you think differently about discipline and wealth, the companion workbook linked below was designed to help you implement these principles in your daily life.